Welcome to episode 9 of the Dual Boot Diaries, the weekly podcast where two longtime Windows users see if they can learn to use Linux daily. I am one of your co-hosts, Adam Patrick Murray.
Hey, I'm the other co-host, Will Smith. And just to be clear, we're not Linux experts. Each week we go through our experience using Linux daily, and with the whole show theoretically culminating in us deleting either Windows or Linux ostensibly from our computers and moving on with our lives.
Yeah, and last week we mentioned, wow, we should get to a Q&A episode.
Yeah.
This is that episode. I finally went through all the questions that have been submitted that we haven't gotten to on past episodes. And I was like, wow, there is a huge list here. So let's just dedicate a whole episode to this. Really good questions. Before we get into it, though, we have a couple quick updates on what we've been working on the past week.
And this doesn't have anything to do with the fact that I went camping last weekend and my Linux futzing time was eaten by that, and like you were like working or something. I don't know what you do.
Yeah. What do I do? I don't know.
Yeah,
what do you say you do here? Anyway, so I have a couple quick updates. The first one is I'm still working on the framework idea that I have. There was a lot of chatter about that. I did get an official statement from Framework. They say it is possible to load a distro on one of their expansion card slots, but they recommend a live distro. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I don't want to do that. Also, I think we have another way that should work. I can understand why they don't have like an official kind of thing. Because they don't want to have to service it, right? If it breaks and they say, oh no, if you just do this, it works, and it breaks, then they're on the hook, right?
Like if I plug an external USB drive into my ASUS desktop motherboard here, it will show that up as a bootable item if there's a UEFI boot partition on it. Like it's dopey that this is like the one part of the USB thing they're choosing not to support.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, once again, I think we do have a solution in place. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
I need to work on that more. I did also find out that yes, in Bazite, which I was experimenting around with, you can have an option to let it load into the gaming mode, just like a SteamOS on the Steam Deck. So that is option.
That's GPU driver dependent. Last time I checked, so it works with some GPUs, but not with others.
Oh, okay. Cool. Also, I had a weird realization, and I don't remember where I was having that chat, but I think it was when I learned that. Was it when we were chatting? No.
Oh no! I know where this is going.
I can't remember where this was, but I was talking about like what fork Fedora is based off of. I think it was in Discord, and somebody was like, and I thought it was. Off of Debian,
Ubuntu was what you thought
Ubuntu. Yeah, that's what I thought. And somebody in the Discord is where I think it was. They were like, "No, it's Fedora. It's a hat." And I was like, "Oh, so it's Red Hat." So all like Fedora is based off of Red Hat, and it's also the name of a hat. It's Fedora, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, now I feel real stupid."
Thematically, this was a Phoenix Down moment for you as well.
But that makes sense. It makes sense. I like it. So those are my quick updates.
Okay, so my quick updates are that I've spent this morning trying to figure out how to make Snapper actually work, because I did the thing where I clicked the button in the Cache OS hello thing, and it said, hey, do you want to install Snapper support? And I looked up what Snapper was, and I was like, that sounds great. So I did that, and then it turns out that it does then create Snapper images every time you update a Pac-Man file. Like anytime you update your system files, it creates Snapper images. But
like before it runs the updates,
both before and after. So it's great. So you get like 25, and it by default it ships with keeping 50 of those updates. That means you basically have 25 updates worth of rollback if you really screw something up bad.
So it's like it's a snapshot in place if something happens, and Snapper's built into Cache.
Well, you have to click a button in the hey, do you want apps and tweaks thing installed?
Oh, okay.
But there's an asterisk, as there often is, because it doesn't integrate with the boot manager by default. So in order for this to work, in order for you to be able to roll back your boot manager, whether it's Grub or Refined or one of the other 50 Limine or one of the other 50 ones that they support, you have to install some hooks in that let it know that there's these ButterFS snapshots.
Oh, because they need to be able to boot off of that rollback
into
version.
A specific snapshot.
Okay.
So I've gotten to the point where I realized that you can do this with Refind, which was exciting. That was step one. Step two was figuring out how to do that. And then the Refind, it's either Refind _ ButterFS or ButterFS _ Refind. I can't remember which one is the tool that helps you do this for Refind, which is what I'm using on this machine. And in order to do that, you have to have a manual Refind configuration boot menu entry for this to work, which I haven't created. So now I got to go figure out how to do that. So anyway, the process is, look, there's movement is all I'm saying on the, hey, maybe you should get Snapper working before you start updating CachyOS willy-nilly because it's a rolling distro.
Okay,
Anyway.
I like that. Also, I did hear one Brad Shoemaker correct you and say Refind is not a boot manager. Is that what he said?
It's a bootloader or something. Look, man, we talked about desktop managers and desktop renderers and 50 million. Technically correct is the worst kind of correct, Brad.
Yeah, I did. Like I was like, I had no idea Brad was like the pedantic kind of guy. You know,
Really?
Usually he's not when it comes to games. Well, but when it comes to Linux,
just wait until the questions episode comes because we had a correction from a Danish listener.
Oh, good.
Anyway, so
great.
I did that. I also have been trying to get Rocksmith working on Linux using the Ubisoft Connect launcher and Lutris. And it just seems like it don't work right now. So I'm going to continue banging my head against that.
Like the game won't launch or the controller won't connect or?
Well, there's no controller. You just hook a microphone up to it and like put it in front of your acoustic guitar or electric guitar or whatever. Rocksmith is like for learning how to play the instrument. It's not a game, really.
For some reason, I thought you could like plug it in, like it had a USB connection on the guitar itself.
Well, so you can get a USB XLR, or sorry, a 1/4-inch interface that lets you plug an electric guitar directly in.
Okay.
But if you're using an acoustic guitar, you just put your mic, aim your mic at it, and it just works.
Well, that's cool.
But the point is, I can't even get the Ubisoft Connect launcher to work because of some change that happened a couple months ago. And like, anyway, I've tried a bunch of different versions of Proton. I've tried a bunch of different versions of Wine. I always get an error that says, "Hey, your OS isn't supported," or "You need a specific version of .NET installed." So I'll keep digging on that. I got frustrated with it, and then I have a bunch of stuff I'm pushing till next week.
Okay, well, let's get to some questions. These questions literally go back to the formation of the questions channel in the Discord. And if you want to get a question in, and hopefully we'll address it on sometime in the show. Hopefully we won't wait this long to address all these questions. But there's a link in the description over to the Full Nerd Discord. We have a channel in there called DBD, stands for Dual Boot Diaries Questions. And you can place a question in there. That's the only questions go in there related to Dual Boot Diaries. If you want to comment on the question that somebody else has had, you can right click on it and create a thread, and then you can chat back and forth based on that question. But
Adam is extremely serious about this, the sanctity of this channel. Only questions.
Yes, people have been good. People have been good about it. Yeah. So anyway, let's get to one of the very first questions that we ever had was from a friend of the show, Spectre, who's helped us out a lot on this journey. Is very active in the Linux channel on the Full Nerd, which is where just general Linux talk happens. And asks, what is the most surprising thing you've encountered in your journey so far? Could be good or bad. Will.
I mean, I think generally. Well, there's two things. One is that the community has been incredibly welcoming and helpful. And I haven't been told to read the effing manual once so far, which is nice. But the main thing is it's a lot easier on my laptop than I expected. Like, I expected the laptop to be the hard part and the desktop to be the easy part. And in actuality, it's been the inverse.
Because the hardware is so integrated?
Because the support for the integrated hardware in the laptops is much better as long as you're getting relatively mainstream laptops, it seems like. Even even this Dell XPS 13 worked pretty much out of the box. Now there's like getting the webcam working is going to be a pain in the butt, it seems like. But other than that, like the Asus S14 worked great. The Lenovo ThinkPad worked great. Like generally speaking, the laptops have just worked out of the box, which has not been my experience in the past. So that was the big one, I think.
And these aren't really old laptops. Like these are within a couple years old.
I think that ThinkPad is the oldest thing I've tried it on, and it's Meteor Lake. I think maybe it might even be one before. It might be an Alder. Maybe a
like a 1260p. Is that
14th gen mobile or something. 13th gen mobile. Anyway,
for me, like I guess it was just simple navigation. Like I didn't know what to expect. So like in my mind, like I was like, oh man, is everything not going to make sense? And I mean, there are some applications that are like, oh, okay, here's an application that comes pre-installed on Ubuntu, but I have no idea what it does. So I just click on it and then just see what it does. So, but I think that's like an app ecosystem thing. That's not necessarily a Linux thing. For the most part, you have settings, you have a dock, you have some sort of file system, you have the terminal command window, you have notifications somewhere. I mean, on the ones that I've been using, it's been pretty straightforward and not like analogous to Windows necessarily, but actually more analogous than I expected, I guess, if that makes sense.
The other thing for me is that I didn't expect to really dive into like alternative UI metaphors. So like the tiling desktop is so nice on the laptop. I hadn't, like, it's the first time, we talked about this a little bit last week, but it's the first time virtual desktops have ever really worked for me, have ever really clicked. And I can't imagine using a laptop without that kind of interface at this point. And it's been like a month so far, 3 weeks, I think. So
yeah, no, I mean, and ultimately, like, I mean, it's crazy because this is episode 9. We're a little over 2 months into this, and I did not think I would be where I am today. Like, I don't know. Part of that is probably just like me not understanding that I can adapt to other things real quickly. But part of it was like, I thought it was going to take a lot more onboarding and ramping. And I have been doing really hard stuff, like in ways that has probably limited my ability to learn even faster. I get that. So the fact that I've been able to pick up as much as I can, like it feels good. It feels like one of those things of like, hey, I've done it. I think anyone who has a general understanding of technology can do it as well. So it feels good.
Agreed.
Yeah. So there's a next question that I want to bring up from Spectre. It's also from friend of the show, Spectre. What has been the easiest and the hardest things to adjust to? Because I feel like it's similar, but it's a little different.
Yeah. I think the hardest stuff for me is knowing that I'm in charge of my own destiny. So like when I jacked up the Neary install on that laptop and had to completely reinstall, the OS wasn't holding my hands, didn't prevent me from making a mistake that caused a problem that, and things like finding out that the snapshot tool, even though I checked the box that said, hey, install this support, was only like half installed and I had to do the other half. I had to read the manual to do the other half. That was a painful lesson. The easiest stuff is just the day-to-day, like, browser-based computing, for the most part, just works. Like, we're recording this in Linux today. I recorded an episode of the Tech Pod in Linux the other day. It's my day-to-day computing stuff works just fine in Linux, except for the video editing, which I'm still kind of working on. So, yeah, I mean, I am still like I would say the hardest thing for me has been still just divorcing myself from Windows. Like I still, when rubber meets the road, I still am just like, I'm just going to go into Windows. It's what I'm comfortable with. I'm just going to do that. I would say the other hardest part, which I feel like I really still struggle with, even though we've talked about it many times, I've talked with other people, is like where to get your packages from. Like I still go back and forth on like where I want to install which application manager. Do I want to do it through command line? Do I want to do it through the GUI? Like, hey, I would say that's probably still one of the hardest things I'm still adjusting to, is like knowing what's right. This is one of the things I like about Paru on the Arch-based distros, is you just type in the thing you're looking for there, and then you choose where you see where it's available, and you can make the choice on an app by app basis. So like things that I want to have containerized and a little bit isolated from the main OS, I grab from, one of the other, it just makes it a little bit easier. So, I mean, I guess also, I can't pull from Flatpaks with that, for full disclosure.
Oh, really? You can't?
I don't have Flatpak set up on this machine, so maybe I can, maybe I can't. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I have not yet. I guess is the right way to say that.
Okay. Is there one you want to dress up next?
You want to talk about the file system stuff? Because this is
sure.
So Mad Cat said, I know you've already passed the install phase multiple times, it seems.
Still install, always be installing.
That's what we say here at Dual Boot Diaries. Never stop installing. But partitioning seems to be a black art. A root, home, do I need a swap partition twice my RAM size? Which just seems like it's an old rule of thumb. So I was curious about this too. We talked about it a little bit with Wendell a few weeks ago. And a lot of the common wisdom is for like old EXTFS file, EXT2 or 3 file systems, which don't necessarily apply in a more modern file system context, like if you're using ButterFS or something like that. So I did some research. So I went to cavecreekcoffee.com/Linux-guides, which is, I think, Alice's complete guide to Linux. This one was written by some guy named Richard, but it's a complete guide to disk partitioning in Linux for maximum performance in 2025. And they had good advice about things like subvolumes home, swap, and root, which is swap should be basically your RAM size if you have more than 16 gigs and want to use Hibernate. If you don't care about using Hibernate, you can use less swap space now. You don't really need a swap space. And I found, at least on the Cache and Ubuntu installers when I've used, set up probably the right amount of swap space for the computers that I was using. The home versus root, and when I say root here, I mean the slash folder, the home folder, the /home/usernames folder. And then there's also the boot folder, which you probably want your boot folder in a separate partition using vfat or something like that, because so that all the OSs can see it. My understanding is you want your root folder to be 50 to 100 gigabytes, probably at most. 30 is acceptable on some distros, but that's where like the main OS software runs. The home folder is the rest of the drive, basically, and the boot folder, the boot partition should be like 2 gigabytes at most if you're going to install a bunch of different versions of Linux and have a bunch of different bootloaders in there. Or not bootloaders, but kernels that you're booting, basically. Now, the ButterFS thing kind of complicates this all because you can do what are called subvolumes in ButterFS, and subvolumes basically give you different rules for things like snapshotting in different parts of the drive structure. So you can have a ButterFS partition that contains everything in your root folder, including your home folders, but probably not your boot folder, if that makes sense. So the slash is all one ButterFS partition except for boot, which is mounted in /boot, and then that's where all your bootloader stuff happens. So whether it's Refind or Grub or Limine or whatever, it lives in that /boot folder. Also, maybe your Windows bootloader. This whole ButterFS subvolume thing is pretty opaque to me right now, and the reason you do that is because you, as Wendell said, you probably want different snapshotting for your home folder where your data and your files are stored versus the rest of the OS, so that, for example, on Cache, when you get an update like I did the other day that broke compatibility with something and prevented the GUI from loading, you can roll back everything but your data files to the previous state and come back to the state that your home folder was when you installed the update, but the state that the system was before you installed the update, if that makes sense. So you don't overwrite your work with a snapshot rollback, basically. I also do most of my work in the cloud, so it kind of doesn't matter, but that's a different, you look very confused.
Well, I mean, because I guess I'm trying to think, for the most part, when I've been installing all of these, I've been using just the built-in default options. Like unless early on when I was dual booting on the same drive and there were some options in some OSs or some distros to say, oh, hey, shrink the volume, 50-50 with whatever Windows is installed. Other than that, I've just been letting it put the default allocation of folders or all that kind of stuff. And I was trying to think like when I needed to go in and do like find any files. Cause I guess for the most part, I haven't been like keeping that much locally. Like I have a work drive that I have all my work stuff on because I'm using it on different systems. I have a lot of stuff in the cloud. Like also, I mean, to be fair, like my normal Windows usage for the past number of years, I've always tried to work in a space that says, hey, if this system dies right now, I don't lose anything because either number one, it's backed up, or because it's cloud-based, or it's on a separate drive. So I guess my practices have always been to leave the actual OS drive to be like as clean as possible. And if there's anything on there that I would have lost, then it wouldn't have mattered to me. So I guess that's probably why I haven't really had to mess around too much in the file structure.
But I think about like, so when I'm setting up the Neary stuff and I'm working on the Neary desktop rules and things like that, that all is in a file in my home folder, right? And I don't want to lose those changes. File. Yeah, it's like a preference. Yeah. It's a comp file, I think. Yeah. And you don't want to lose that work. You don't want to lose that kind of stuff. So at some point I have to figure out if I can add a subvolume for the home folder, or how to. I'm sure you can, whether I can take an existing folder and make it its own subvolume with a different set of snapshot rules, and then I'll figure that out. But anyway, the TLDR for this question is probably you could just do what the OS defaults to when you do the installer. And if you need to change something later, it's pretty easy. Because like, for example, on my laptop, it wasn't hibernating properly, and I was able to just use the built-in tool to shrink the partition, the main home partition a little bit, and add the extra space that was needed to the swap partition. And then my hibernation files just resolved themselves after I rebooted, right?
Okay. Yeah, because that's what I was wondering too. You were saying the recommended sizes, and I'm like, I just let it do what it wanted to do. I didn't set any of those sizes. I think coming from Windows world, where when you make a mistake on the install, you often have to reinstall to fix the mistake. That's not a problem here. You can do all sorts of stupid stuff live if you want, and it'll probably work. Yeah. Sometimes not so much. Okay. Yeah. No, and like that's the other thing too. Because I haven't really settled on a piece of hardware that I've used for a long time. I don't have a ton of preference files, things that I would be like, oh, you know what? I want to try to use this on a different system, except for I think it would apply to the framework thing, because if I can't boot off of the OS off of the expansion card like I want to, then I'm going to have to figure out something else to transfer either the home folder or maybe some sort of preferences so that both systems see the same stuff. Anyway, they do actually have a follow-up question later on that is pretty much related to this. So Mad Cat as well asks, I would love a breakdown for the file structure when you install an application. Windows is notorious for spraying files all over the place, especially with the whole OneDrive stuff. I thought Linux would be different, but it still creates hidden directories, and .local/share seems to be a hub for all sorts of apps. Maybe how it relates to apps installed through Pacman APT versus Flatpak, or is it more related to multi-user support that Linux is supposed to be really good at? .config is another hidden directory that seems important. So once again, that's something I haven't really looked into. What do you?
So .config is where the settings for your software live. Oh, okay. First off, any folder with a dot in front of the file name is going to be hidden when you're browsing by default, unless you do the flags that show everything. It's like -A if you're doing ls, or you can flip a toggle in your file Dolphin or file manager, whatever you happen to use in your distro. The nice thing about the way Linux works is because it keeps track of where it puts everything, whether it's in var, opt, whatever, user local, or whatever the different folders are, you really don't have to worry about this. The question is, do you want to install a version that's tied into the main OS that comes from one of the main OS distros, whether that's Pacman or apt-get, or I can't remember what the Red Hat one is because I never really used Red Hat. Or do you want to use something that's more virtualized and isolated from the rest of the system, which is going to be like a Flatpak or a Snap or something like that? And the main difference there, it's kind of like when you install software on Windows, and if it asks you, if it says, hey, do you want to do something? Do you want to do this when you start the installer? That's going to install it in C program files or C program files x86. If it doesn't, it's going to put it in a subfolder of your profile directory and it'll only be available to you as a user. And then it does some weird symlink business to make it work like a normal application. And this is the same. This is literally the same metaphor, even though the executions are pretty different.
Really?
So, like the Flatpak version is probably only going to be accessible to you as the user, is my understanding. So, if you had multiple users on the same machine, which neither of us do, then that other user won't see that version of Firefox or Discord or whatever it is you're installing with the Flatpak.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like they thought it would be easier, but you're saying it's probably pretty similar in a lot of ways.
Well, the difference is I think Linux is generally better about cleaning stuff up when you're not using it anymore. So like at the end of my system upgrades using Paru or Pacman or whatever, it says, hey, there's a bunch of orphan packages that you're not using anymore, because it keeps track of all the upstream, like which packages are dependent on and which packages depend on others. And when it sees one that is not being depended on by anything and not being used, you'll be like, hey, are you sure you need this old version of whatever, Python or NVM or whatever? And then it'll say you can remove it and you can clear the cache of it, and then it'll just download it again if it needs it later in the future for something. And
nice.
Like I said, does generally a better job. The other thing is that it's generally more portable. So like your settings, instead of being buried in some registry hive someplace that you can't really access as a user other than to go through and manually change individual settings, because everything's in that .config folder, if you copy that .config folder from one profile to another, or even one computer to another that has the same software installed, the software is going to behave in exactly the same way as it did on the other computer. Because it doesn't know better. It just is using the same config files. They're just text files. It's really easy. Yeah.
Okay. I have an interesting one. This is a two-parter. The first one is from friend of the show, Josh Marshall. Asks, I'd love to hear a discussion of daily apps you use, especially email. I kind of hate all the Linux mail clients. And then Macog411 adds on to it. Have you seen Pine and Elm email text editors? Do you use an email client?
I use Fastmail and Gmail exclusively.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I am not the right person to ask about this.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, I saw Firebird? Thunderbird?
Thunderbird.
Thunderbird
is classic. It used to be from Mozilla. It seems fine. I don't know. I try to avoid using email wherever possible, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I think it was built in. It's built into Ubuntu. One of the distros I was using, it was built in. I don't think it was Pop OS, but one of them I did had that one built in. And yeah, that's the thing. I don't use any local stuff. I mean, I've never used Outlook on the Windows side. I think really I would have to go all the way back to when I was using a Mac, and I did use whatever the Mac
Mail.
No, it's not called Mac.
It's just called mail.app, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just whatever the built-in mail thing. I think that's probably literally the last time that I've used a dedicated email client for a computer, not phones. That's different. But yeah, so okay. Yeah, so I guess we don't have anything on mail clients. Sorry about that. Have you heard of the Pine and Elm email text editors though? Like, oh man. Is that essentially doing your email in a terminal window? I
mean, look, if you don't know by now, you can do everything in the terminal window, Adam.
It's true.
Did you see what was it, P-Top or something Wendell showed us was like a full-on, hey, how's your task manager that runs in a terminal?
P-Top,
runs in a terminal window. The Pine and Elm, Pine was... I think Pine stands for Pine is not email, if I had to guess.
Why is there so many of these that do that?
It was because Unix, because GNU is not Unix is why. Let's see, it's no longer under active development. What is it? Pine is not Elm is what it is. It's not Elm. Elm was an early email client found on Unix machines. Pine was a port. Also, the person who wrote this says that was never the case, and it's not true. It just started off as a word, not an acronym, probably because Elm was a tree and Pine was a tree. And anyway, the point is, this is all stuff from the ancient history of Unix. And like, if like I used Pine when I was in college and got 2 emails a month, and it was inadequate for that, as I recall. So,
I mean, to tell you the truth, when I read this, like I did, like we just said, I don't use a dedicated email client, but I was like, I kind of want to see what that looks like. But I'm probably not going to do that. Seems scary.
Look, this is like hey, did you know that you can use VI commands to programatize a lot of text editing and turn 50 million keystrokes into 2 keystrokes over and over again? Yeah, you can absolutely do that. I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you for suggesting this.
Okay. I've got one for you specifically.
Okay.
Friend of the show, Cause MC, who's been around in the following Full Nerd for a long time, asks, as a game dev, you are correct, Will, that game dev takes up a lot of space. Any plans to test UE5 Unity Godot in a Linux environment? You've talked about this a little bit, but yeah.
So I installed Godot on my laptop when we were in Arizona and started futzing around with it and started working on a project. I'm probably not going to use. I don't think I have anybody that I'm working with that's using Unity right now. Everybody's moved off of Unity because of their terrible licensing terms. Or, I mean, they're not terrible anymore, but they briefly made them terrible, and then everybody revolted, and then they made them not terrible again. But people are less likely to kind of trust Unity when they change the terms of the deal midway through contracts. So I doubt Unity. UE5 maybe, but generally speaking, as a person who's an independent contractor and is getting paid on a daily or hourly basis, I tend to use whatever the least. Like I don't want my stupid choices to be a problem for them.
So like, oh, hey, can you load in this latest project? And you're like, well, it's not really running in Linux. And they're like,
yeah, and then they're like, well, we're not going to pay you. And I'm like, well, then my daughter's not going to have food. So no, I don't, unless I'm doing a project of my own on UE5, I'm probably not going to load up a bunch of Unreal stuff on Linux. That said, I don't think there's any problem with, I think it seems like Godot, as long as you're running an unmodified Godot version of Godot, should be fine. Because like it's just a set of runtimes, and I can download that and open up somebody else's Godot project. If people have modified the source of Godot and recompiled it to have a custom version of the editor, then I probably won't. I probably wouldn't try that.
What's your sense of how many game dev people in that space use Linux as like just daily usage? Is it more or less than any other?
A lot of programmers do, is my feel. Like not a lot, but enough. Probably not people at big giant, not people at like Bungie or Insomniac or something like that, where they have a dedicated DevOps team building out workstations and stuff for them. But I know quite a few indies are using Mac, and probably I know at least of a couple people who are using Linux for their programming stuff. My guess is that the artists are probably much more on the Windows side, because unfortunately the PSD, the venerable PSD, is a core piece of technology for a lot of game studios in terms of like you'll make materials for so for example, if you're rendering a piece of a pot in Unreal, right? You'll have materials that are the textures. You'll have another texture that describes like the surface kind of texture, roughness. Yeah. You'll have another one that describes the shininess. You'll have another one that describes if there's any metallic areas, like if there's metallic paint on it or something like that. You'll have ones that describe that. If it's emissive somehow, I mean, probably a pot's not going to be emissive, but theoretically, if it was a light source, you'd have another texture that describes that. And all those those textures are combined into a material in UE, and often the source of those materials, the way you generate those, is out of a PSD file that's just like a whole boatload of layers of different materials in one PSD, because it's just an easy way to store them. There are open alternatives. I know that Pixar had one that they did a bunch of SIGGRAPH talks on, and it's actively supported by Maya and Blender and everybody in the world. But at the end of the day, the 2D artists who are making the textures and making those materials are probably using Photoshop. So,
okay, so it's probably more common that people are on Macs.
I would say that probably an order of magnitude more people are using Macs, but I think I think no. The other thing is, I think a lot of Windows programmers are probably using WSL, the Windows subsystems for Linux, because they like the development environments in the terminals for that, and that's possible. But I know that like you can do VS Code and stuff like that. The C# stuff that Unreal uses now there's a Linux version of that compiler and stuff like that. So like it's probably for the programmers is probably fairly turnkey.
Okay. Well, speaking of Windows subsystem for Linux, we do have Alexandriite, I believe is the way to pronounce that, asked, along with a bunch of other questions, is there a reason why you aren't just using Windows subsystem for Linux to onboard into Linux? How would you recommend new users take advantage of Windows subsystems for Linux to introduce them to the strengths of Linux? What are you missing from the real deal? And I understand the question, but I think it's missing like the basis of why we're doing this is that we want to try to get outside of the Windows ecosystem. Like yes, you could use Linux or learn to use Linux through WSL in Windows, but the idea is that we're trying to see if we can not use Windows. So I've never messed with it. Have you messed with it?
Yeah, I've used it a fair amount. So basically what it does is it gives you a virtualized console for whichever version of Linux you install. You can do Ubuntu, or I think you can get them from the Microsoft Store, which is really funny to me. But you basically download a virtual machine that gives you a different, like when you open your terminal app, you can open PowerShell, you can open CMD, the normal Windows command line, or you can open WSSL for whichever versions of Linux you have installed. And you can then run Linux programs inside that. So if you need, for example, if you want to compile something with GCC instead of with Visual Studio, you can do that, and things that maybe don't exist on the Windows side.
But this is all command line. This is not GUI.
There's no GUI. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to spin up a virtual GUI in WSSL and then remote desktop into that and have that replace your main desktop. But then you're running a virtualized Linux inside Windows, and it's still going to, it's not like the things that people are using WSSL for are like running AI workloads and stuff like that. They're downloading things from Hugging Face and running models locally and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. And so I think that gets to the other point of the question, because that's what I imagined as well, is that if you're talking about new users, meaning me, somebody who's barely, looked at Linux in the past, then the idea of trying to learn Linux through the command line, no, I'm good. I'm a GUI person. so I don't even think, even if I wanted to use WSSL to do, learn more about Linux, that's just not what I'm here for. So it's a good question, but I think it just doesn't apply to us or the spirit of this podcast.
Oh, the other thing I didn't say, people use WSSL to run Docker. You can run Docker natively on Windows, Docker containers natively on Windows. Mm-hmm. But for example, if you want to run a Plex server, a lot of people will run that in Docker. And if you're a system admin, you need to build Docker images for deployment on like AWS or some big server cluster someplace or something like that. You might use WSSL on your Windows machine to set up those Docker containers. And then once you have them working the way you want, you test them there, and then you can deploy them to the big cloud instance or big server metal someplace else. So anyway,
okay,
but you're not going to run you're not running KDE on WSSL, I don't think. Oh,
okay. I mean, let us know. I guess that would be weird, but once again, it's not the spirit of the show. We're trying to de-Windows our life, or de-Microsoft our life.
We should just the follow-up episode to this Q&A episode is the "Hey, you told us why we're wrong" episode.
the corrections. Yeah. The corrections episode. Every question episode is followed by a corrections episode. Nah, I think we're fine. I think this one kind of piggybacks off of that same idea of de-windowifying our life. Friend of the show, Diaries, has been around with us for a long time as well. As with how easy it is to extend Windows 10 support into 2026 and possibly beyond, do you really think 2025 is the year of Linux, or has it been postponed? I think there's two ways to look at this. but I'm curious to see what you think. What do you think? Do you think we're wrong? 2025 is not the year.
I think my feelings probably changed a little bit with 25H2. I think Windows 11 25H2 has been seems like a really bad launch for Microsoft in terms of new Windows updates, in terms of consumer confidence, and like how much the choices they're making with things like disabling local logins and things like that seem incredibly toxic for that platform to me, at least for the way I use Windows. So no, we've always been a little bit cheeky when we've said that 2025 is the year of Linux. I started saying that last year as a joke. What are you talking about? Right. Just to be clear, I was joking when I said it last year. I was like, oh yeah, 2025, finally the year of Linux.
We don't joke about this.
Every time someone says it's the year of Linux, it's always a joke, Adam. This is the thing. People have been saying it's the year of Linux since like 1996, 1995. I'm sure somewhere in 1991, there's a mailing list for the kernel where somebody is like, oh yeah, 1992, year of Linux, baby. We're coming up on our 6th month of active development.
I would love to find out where the first mention of that is.
Oh yeah.
Like that phrase, XX date is the year of Linux. Yeah. If somebody knows that would be interesting. Yeah. So I see this as not so much that Linux is like pulling people away from it as Microsoft is pushing people out. And luckily Linux is in a spot where people can land lighter than has been in the past. We have plenty of people in the Discord who've been like, oh man, I tried Linux 5-10 years ago and I just didn't stick with it, but now I'm trying again and find it even easier. Like it's definitely come a long way. So like what the sense I'm getting is, actually, have I ever talked about why I got off of Mac OS?
No.
Yeah. So, because I was a diehard Mac person. I got my first Mac in 2008 when I went to audio engineering school. It came part of the package. I'd never used a Mac before that. And obviously for audio purposes, I still think Mac is like where it's at for sure, for a lot of reasons. We don't need to get into it. But so I dove right in and I loved it. I got my first iPhone. I was, literally would have a watch party for, well, no, not that far, but we'd have a watch party for every Apple keynote, that Steve Jobs would get on. Like I was a diehard Mac person. Wow. And
you met Gordon.
No. I mean, I knew of Gordon at that time. Okay. So like I knew of his rants and stuff like that. Some of them, it hurt me a little bit, but it was all in good fun, really. Hopefully.
It was not in good fun. Absolutely not in good fun. Anyway, yeah.
And then what happened is that Apple started to put cracks in me, like drive me away. So as a creative person who went to school for audio, later got into video and photography through that, I used to use a program that was Apple developed called Aperture. It was essentially a Lightroom
it was
a version of it was photo editing, but also file management system. And I really liked it, and they killed it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, well, what should I use? And then that's when I moved on to, it's probably the first time I started using Adobe apps was Lightroom. At that time, the subscription model was different, like whatever. And then I had learned to edit video on Final Cut 7. And all of a sudden they were like, nah, dead, cut. We got Final Cut X or 10 or whatever you want to call it. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to move to that. So what's the next analogy or analogous to that? It was Premiere. And I was like, okay, well, I'll move over to Premiere. It felt like a Final Cut 8 at the time when we were transitioning over. And slowly but surely, like I just started seeing like cracks. Like it kept like hitting me and like, punching me in the face. And like after a while I was like, okay, I don't appreciate this. And then I started noticing like, oh wow, everything I'm doing is in Adobe products. And guess what? You can just run Adobe products over on Windows. And at that time, the Mac versions were generally superior to the Windows counterparts for Adobe products. But also around that time, it was like catching up.
Well,
Like it was very much like at least in my space that I was running in, that I was like, hey, you know, Premiere for Mac has, you know, some features and it's less buggy than the Windows version, but the Windows version is close. And within a couple years, it caught up.
And also the Windows version, you could build a machine that cost half what the Mac workstation cost.
And so that was the last part.
Yeah.
That was the last part. So I had my favorite MacBook, and I mean, still one of my favorite laptops ever was 2015 MacBook Pro with all the ports you could ever want. Like it's hilarious now because it's like the epitome of the opposite of what it is now. You could get a matte screen option. I actually took out the DVD drive and installed an SSD in the time. Mm-hmm. Like you could upgrade the RAM, all this kind of stuff, which was awesome. And then yeah, they started stripping out the laptop stuff. But more importantly, on the work side, we had old Mac Pro workstations, and then that's when they killed them and went to the trash can. I was just like, okay, you're literally driving me away at every step. Like, and then, so on top of that, then it was like, okay, well, now it's easier than ever to build a PC. And that's when I started building my first PCs and getting into it. And I was like, okay, well, like, yes, it's different than what a Mac was, but in so many ways it was there and ready to catch my fall in an easy way. And I feel like that's where we're at now with Windows, is that they're doing, like, whether you're on Windows 10 and you don't want to go to Windows 11, there's probably a reason why people don't want to go to Windows 11. They don't like the look of it. They don't like the subscription stuff. They don't like all that.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So like those people already have the kind of cracks. They're already seeing those cracks. And then people who are on Windows 11, they're seeing the cracks as well as the subscription model and constantly being, you know, hounded by ads and things like that. So I think it's more like, yes, they can extend support for Windows 10, but those cracks are already there. Like Microsoft is not actively coming over with you know, something to try to clean up those cracks and be like, hey, sorry. You know what? Listen, we'll bring you back into the fold. And so I think that's what's happening, is it's just actively driving people away. So I think, yes, Linux has gotten better over time, and people who have been in the Linux space understand that, but like us Windows users are more just like, oh, where can we land safely? Obviously, I think a lot of people are moving towards Macs, but I do think a lot of people are moving to Linux as well because of that.
And then or
at least considering Linux.
The other thing is that every other time, like each time you've tried Linux in the past, I've tried Linux in the past, there's always been something that held me back. Either games didn't work right, or I couldn't use a webcam, or my sound didn't work right, or, you know, there were problems, right? And with the work that Valve's done with Proton and the better drivers that we're seeing these days, like the games thing was really the big problem I had last time. Like the last time I tried this, which was a long time ago, I couldn't really run games on Linux at all. Even, I mean, Tux Racer worked, but nobody realistically has ever wanted to play Tux Racer.
I kind of want to try it.
I mean, enjoy your 7 minutes and then let me know how it went. Look, it's still better than that new Sonic racing game, but that's a whole different. Anyway, the point is, like the things that used to be hard and used to have people booting back into Windows are much easier and work better now. And we're down to, do I really need Adobe apps, and do I need access to Microsoft Office? And like, I'm finding increasingly that the answer to those things are both no, I'm probably okay. Or I can use the web version of Office which is free anyway. And that sounds great to me. Anyway.
Yeah. So I actually do think we will be able to look back and be like, there was inflection points along the way. Maybe 2025 is not the year of Linux in the way that we joke around about, but I think more importantly is that we're seeing inflection points on Windows showing cracks, and that people like dissatisfied with Windows and feeling like they want to explore other options. And I think 2025 is one of those years for sure.
And I think we're not going to know which year was the year of Linux for 10 years after it happens, probably. Like for me, 2025 very well could be the year of Linux. It's feeling pretty good, if I'm being honest, for me personally.
Yeah.
But for you personally, it may be 2026 or 2027 because your workloads are different, and that's fine. I think the whole point of this thing is you can do whatever you want. We have infinite choice, and with that comes a great deal of power.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and it really is so easy. Like I feel like like we've joked around about like, oh, would you give your grandma this kind of thing? And other than like, you know, specific needs for my grandma, I think yes, like depending on the distro and the way that it's set up, you could easily be like, hey, grandma, just click this thing. You'll launch Google Chrome. Oh, you know Google Chrome? You do everything in Google Chrome? Well, here you go. It's the same thing. So like, I think it is super, super easy. So let's hit a couple more and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any, there's one that I think is kind of interesting that's a little off topic, but okay. I wanted to address it just with this crowd because I think even though we have the Full Nerd podcast where we talk about DIY PC hardware weekly, we do have a lot of people who have probably never listened to that. And actually, you know what? I want to put that question out there. How many people listen to the Dual Boot Diaries that don't listen to the Full Nerd? Because I feel like there's a lot of crossover there, but maybe I'm wrong. So like, I feel like a lot of people are here for Linux and that kind of talk, but don't care too much about hardware. I'd be curious. Anyway, Moose WRX was asking, I was wondering if you knew why they don't make more AMD laptops. I've been wanting to make an all-in AMD laptop for a while, but I wanted to be more useful with my Steam Deck, but it doesn't seem to exist. So I wanted to bring this up for a couple things because typically AMD has been thought of as like one of the better options for driver support, mainly on the GPU side in Linux. For the CPU side, it feels like Intel is actually pretty well supported as well. I think the
CPU side is a little easier too. Like it's you know, there's not as much moment to moment. Like once you support a new instruction set, everything's fine, and you don't have to think about it anymore for a while. Yeah,
but and like I've heard from other people that NVIDIA support has been getting better on the GPU side. I think still probably the safest bet, at least for me as a noob, would be to tell people like, yeah, you probably want to look at AMD options if you're a noob like me and don't want to have hassle. That seems to be the safe way. So I can understand why this person would want an all AMD option. And this is something that we've talked a lot about on the Full Nerd. Some they probably don't listen to the Full Nerd. So, or maybe just a newer subscriber, but yeah, so AMD, they're not as big of a company and have the resources like an NVIDIA or even an Intel to a certain degree. I mean, I know Intel is going through some changes right now, but for the most part, AMD is still more scrappy, if you will. And so like one of the things the leadership over the past couple of years has tried to emphasize is really focusing on key areas, not trying to do everything, but focusing on key areas. Whether that's true or not, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but that has at least been the messaging from at least one of the main executives, Jack Hune, which we've chatted with plenty of times. And he's like, listen, we want to get desktop GPUs in a really good spot, even if that means at the expense of laptops. So they haven't had a ton of laptop design wins. They've had programs that have kind of started and stopped, like AMD Advantage, where those were like, oh, hey, you get an AMD-based laptop for both the CPU and the GPU, and it has advantages to it, hence why it's called AMD Advantage. They say they want to come back to trying to kind of retake that laptop space, but they, at least right now, the messaging is they want to focus, you know, in other key areas. So, yeah, there's not a ton of AMD laptop options if you're looking for discrete GPUs, but there are some.
I mean, there are a lot of APU Ryzen AI laptops, though.
Yeah, honestly, I think that is the better way to look at it. Like, Moose does not. I think they referenced the Steam Deck, so I'm assuming they probably are wanting to do more gaming. So yeah, the APU based options, while very powerful, are not like, I mean, unless it's a Strix Halo device, even if it's Strix Halo, I wouldn't call it a gaming laptop. I mean, it is powerful, but yeah,
machine.
So, yeah. I mean, you're still talking about an APU versus a discrete GPU. And so, yeah, like discrete GPU options for AMD on the laptops are still pretty thin. So, and I think, unfortunately, it's probably going to be that way for the next couple of years. Yeah. So that's, hopefully that helps clarify, answer some questions.
The other thing
about
is
where AMD's at, but yeah.
So you can run an AMD CPU with integrated and an NVIDIA discrete graphics and choose which GPU you use at launch, right? Like that is a thing you can do if you so desire, and you can even set it up so that you can switch. Like there's a million different ways you can configure that with varying levels of futzing around to get what you want out of that install. Like, so you can only use the NVIDIA thing when you run games. You can run the APU, GPU for the rest of your desktop use, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and I do think there are opportunities for having a discrete GPU that makes sense outside of the gaming thing. I know we've talked about virtualizing Windows in certain ways, that maybe you can pass through one of the GPUs to the VM and the other one to, have like having one for Windows and one for Linux. So yeah. I wish AMD were more competitive in that kind of space. But as of right now, Intel still is the majority of the CPU market share on laptops, and NVIDIA is still the majority of GPU market share on laptops. And so AMD's like, okay, well, we got to pick our battles. So we'll come back to laptops at another date. Doesn't mean there aren't options. There are options, and hopefully at the next trade show, like subscribe over on PCWorld. We do a lot of laptop coverage over there, the PCWorld YouTube channel. So I'll try to make sure that like CES is the next upcoming trade show. If there's any new AMD based laptops, then yeah, we'll highlight them. So
cool. You want to do one more? We get this one a lot. This one comes from Vash108, friend of the show. And says, after getting more settled in, would you guys ever consider doing a screen share recording or do a walkthrough of your setup? And then follows up with, is there a combined list somewhere of the software you guys found helpful or useful? We don't have a list. That's actually a really good idea. We should probably keep a running.
That's a good idea.
It's in our show notes. It would be relatively easy to pull out, especially now while we're starting out. The other thing we could do is make a wiki someplace. I've always wanted a wiki. Make a wiki someplace where folks just add stuff to the list as we talk about it. There's two ways to do that. One is that we're totally okay with you all doing that if you think it would be useful. We'll plug it in the show notes, stuff like that.
Because a lot of people have been asking like, oh hey, what was that VM thing that Wendell talked about on his episode? And some people were like, oh, it's Winboat. It wasn't Winboat. I've been the one who was talking about Winboat. He actually talked about something else, and now I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
Yes, that WinApps, that's what it is. The other thing we could do is that, hey, we could write some sort of article on PCWorld that has, some, it's just a place for us to keep stuff. It's public if people want to see it, but, really it's for us to add to a list. Having a video about it, I'm still working on the script. I'm almost done with the first edit or the first pass of the script about here's how you get started in Linux, but I'm not going to get too much into the specifics about the application stuff because it's so person dependent, what are you doing kind of thing. But yeah, so it's something to explore.
I think there's an argument that it might be useful to show how your desktop is set up, what kind of stuff have you done to KDE or GNOME or Neri in my case.
100%. Yeah. So we actually did talk about this off camera because we have gotten requests, and we've talked about this a little bit before on the podcast, where we do have a lot of people who listen to the audio only. And so we don't want to alienate them for the video version and be like, oh, hey, check out our desktop. And then the audio people are just sitting there like, I can't see anything. Yeah. So I think the best way that we could approach it is to have a video, and maybe we could do a couple of these, have videos on the Foldner Network YouTube channel where it is oh, hey, here, check out our distro, how we have things organized, how we have things looking. I mean, mine is pretty simple because I haven't really dug too deep into one, but yours is so uniquely tailored. I think we could easily just do a quick little video pre-recorded that just goes up on the channel. I don't know what we would call it, but we could figure it out.
It's like a what's in your bag kind of, but for your desktop, right?
Yeah. Let me see your distro. Can I see your distro? Something like that. So yeah, I think we could totally do that. And then we can tell people about it on here, and then you go find it on the channel. And whether you're an audio listener or video listener, you can go check that out. So I think that's a good place to start if people just want to see kind of our setup. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it up, right?
Yeah. Let's wrap it up. Lots of good questions. Thank you. We didn't get through all of them, but we got through a good chunk of them. And I'll tell you what, some of these have been sitting there for a while.
I was going to say, somebody else asked why we aren't on Distro Watch. Who was that? That was
Pyrocumulus, who's also been with a friend of the show for a long time.
I think I don't know the Distro Watch community particularly well. I'm being careful how I say this because I don't want to make anybody angry, but I'm not sure that they would appreciate. My perception is that maybe the kind of people who are real into Distro Watch might not appreciate our, let's say, freewheeling approach to using desktop Linux.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Well, I did go to distrowatch.com for the first time. I was poking around there. We actually talked about it in our Discord chat to see if people used it. Side discussion. I did see at the bottom there is a link for a contact, corrections and suggestions to a one Jesse Smith. And there is an email, distro@distrowatch.com. So, I was like, should I just email them? Be like, oh, hey, I have a podcast. But, maybe if somebody in the community wants to email Jesse and be like, oh, hey, here's a podcast. Why don't you add it?
I wasn't going to go that far, but okay. Be kind and gentle and maybe don't send 300 messages.
No. I mean, yeah. But like, I'm going to assume that's how the podcast get added to that page.
There was there was not an option for submitting a podcast that I could find.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that would be funny though, because we are experts.
No,
it only makes sense.
We explicitly say at the top we're not experts, Adam. We're just two guys.
We're just dudes, man, just like you.
Just figure it out, brah. Just get out there, with no cap. We're just trying to figure out how this whole thing works.
6'7".
Yeah, no, don't say that. Don't know those kids have come now. We don't want that. We're too old for that.
Now we got to get the kids into Linux. Actually, do you remember the people I talked to at the original Micro Center video? There were some young kids.
Yeah, they were using that Hannah Montana and that Rebecca Black Linux. I'm sure they were in there.
No, BBN is what it was.
Oh, BBN. My bad.
Anyway. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Keep add in your questions. We'll get back to a normal episode. We do have the finishing touches on the episode where I talked with a security expert about Linux. I just watched that episode. It's a good one. So we will be posting that soon. So you get a 2-for-1 in two episodes in 1 week. I don't know exactly which week, but it'll be coming soon.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody. And check back next week for your fix of Linux talk. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.